Good morning, Bitcoiners. What is up, you guys? I'm super excited to bring you the Build a Mind podcast today. I am with my co-host, Will. So we have a pretty cool set of guests today. We have Scott and Tali with us. They are the creators of FreeMarket Kids. FreeMarket Kids is they make board games that teach kids how Bitcoin works and really cool fundamentals like that. So we're gonna get into it, but I just want to give a little bit of an intro on. I have some intro on Scott, but I don't really have anything on Tali because Tali was kind of a last minute guest that we wanted to get on to add context. But Scott is a freedom loving entrepreneur, an author, and a game designer. He is the proponent of finding freedom and taking self-custody of education, money, and speech. He and his wife, Tali, co-founded FreeMarket Kids. Their passion is to give the next generation the knowledge and the tools to maximize their chances for freedom, success, and happiness. FreeMarket Kids makes it easy and fun to introduce money concepts to kids through tabletop games, courses, lessons, plans, and trusted resources. They are best known for Hodl Up, a Bitcoin mining game. And Scott, well, we don't have to talk about that. I'm sure that at the end of the day, we'll get into Scott's background. But I love these. I love this idea. You know, the best way to incept ideas and culture or ideas and theories into the culture is through games and music. And what Scott and Tali are doing, and I think you can agree, Will, is changing the way that the next generation or from the way previous generations were taught. They're changing, all of that up by allowing kids to understand and learn concepts at a very early age without ever really talking about quote unquote Bitcoin and money. So really cool stuff. I'm super excited about it. Before we get into the episode, I want to tell you guys about the Mastermind Club. Now, you guys have heard it before, but we're going to say it again. The Mastermind Club is the place to go if you are an early Bitcoiner and want to learn how to mine Bitcoin. See, mining Bitcoin it's not an easy task. I'd say that it's got its ups and downs, it's got its hardships. But if you're interested, if you're dedicated, you can really get into it by joining a supportive community of like-minded individuals who meet weekly to share insights, exchange ideas, and provide mutual encouragement on the exhilarating journey of Bitcoin mining. So this group is led by seasoned pros like Scott Offord and the rest of the team. And we get together weekly to brainstorm innovative strategies and stay motivated towards your mining goals. But check it out. Every single month, we also do a deep dive into critical topics like site development, site procurement, engineering. This month in June, we're actually doing a deep dive into how to build a hosting facility. So we'll have a guest, Jason, who is the CEO and founder of Hilfert Hilfert. And basically, he's really knowledgeable. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys will join us for that. You can gain free access to the deep dives if you'd like. But if you want to join the Mastermind Club, I'm going to put it up here on the screen for you. Let's see, right there. So you can scan that QR code. It'll take you exactly where to go, or you can go to bitcoinminingworld.com and you can find out more about it. Let's get into the show. We're going to bring Scott and Tali up. Scott, Tali, welcome to the Build a Mind podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good morning, guys.
We're happy to have you here. So I just want to say I love the passion and the idea behind FreeMarket Kids. You guys are giving the next generation the knowledge and the tools to maximize their chances for freedom, success, and happiness. This hits very close to home for me because I'm about to have my first kid. My wife is pregnant of 8 months. So, in like a month and a half, we're going to have a baby. And I'll tell you, that little boy is not just my heart and soul, but he's also the next generation. And as someone who had it hard growing up and still to this day, I'm struggling with the repercussions of not having the right tools and the knowledge to make something stable and strong in this world. Not only was I at a disadvantage due to the lack of knowledge, but I'm also facing an economic system that is pushing hard against me. And so I think what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. You are teaching children how to really make something of themselves in the world, and they don't even understand that yet. So you're incepting these ideas into their heads, and it's like the easiest way to do it because you're making games that are fun, that can be played around the table like Monopoly. So let's talk about that a little bit. What was what was the idea that really got you going to start building Bitcoin games?
I guess I should probably take that one. So at the time that I was building that, I had gotten into Bitcoin before Tali did, and all four of our kids were still in the equivalent of a homeschooling level of high school. We had 7 dogs. The house was just crazy, and Tali was focused on what kids need to be studying, where do they need to be, what clothes do they wear, just all the normal living type of things. And then I come along and I say, oh, you really should listen to this podcast. You should really read this book. There's this esoteric thing that you've never heard of before, and it's like whatever. And I happen to like games. I've been going to game conference probably for a decade with my brother. I grew up with all the traditional tabletop games. And so to try to break through, I basically started to put what I was learning about Bitcoin into a physical thing that I could show her. So it actually started with Mahjong tiles. Eventually I moved to dice, and then I went to cards. So these were all predecessors to what we have today with Huddle Up. But it all started with me wanting to share with Tali, and I happen to like games, and this was a medium that I could use to help share ideas.
Can you explain how you used the tiles, the dice, and the cards? Like, just maybe run through each one. Like, how did you involve Bitcoin education or revelation using those tools? Like, what's actual, like, the schema underneath
So
all
the Mahjong tiles, I think the way I recall it, I just put little white stickers on it, or I had printed out different symbols for someone who, like a person. So this person could be sending or receiving, and there were different colors. Then there'd be a tiles that I would put different amounts of Bitcoin on. So this person is sending Bitcoin to this person. And I was trying to understand at the time how nonces work. So I also had a hash. I had a hash thing. So you had to have a hash on this thing, and would move that with it. And I said, together, this block of Mahjong tiles represents a transaction. And then, of course, you could try to say there's multiple of these things, and you could move them around. And it was just something we had. I think that particular set of Mahjong I just picked up at a used place, like an antique store or something, and it was $1 or $2. So it wasn't like I was spending a lot of money. It was more me just trying to find something that I could physically move around. And it was easy to print out stickers, and I already had the tiles, so it was available. There's really not much more to it, Will. It was
Yeah,
that's how to make use of what you have, basically.
Totally. No,
Welcome
that's cool.
to Bitcoiner.
Yeah, because not only are you're trying to make Bitcoin approachable and like then teach things about it. And I'm just thinking back to the early meetup days, back in like 2013, 2014, we would occasionally have activities at the meetup where people would create paper wallets using, they'd create their public-private key pair using, a die, like a 12-sided die and a pencil and paper. And so we had them go through all of that. And it wasn't really about making Bitcoin approachable. It was like just to kind of demonstrate you don't need a computer to create your cryptographic key. You can do it this way too. And so we weren't making Bitcoin approachable
That's
or
hard.
welcoming. We were doing this activity
Yeah.
that showed you kind of the underlying cryptography sort of thing at a very primitive level, I guess. And but I love the idea of like, you're telling stories, you're making it approachable. And so can you share how you use the dice and the playing cards?
The dice was not what you're thinking of, where you roll dice because you're trying to create entropy. I was using it for the colored die. You can buy blank colored die pretty cheaply. And I was doing that to try to represent the different players in the Bitcoin in the game. I did not try to even get close to explaining what was going on cryptographically. It's already an abstract concept. And I think it's more, in this case, it's more about the story of, I want to send something to somebody else. In this case, I want to communicate value to somebody else. And that's where I started. I didn't use it for the entropy side. This is actually your start of the story.
From the point of view of the student. So I think my biggest mental hurdle when he started talking to me about Bitcoin was that it was a real thing, that it was as real as a physical bill, like a dollar bill that I can hold in my hand. Because in my mind, if it's digital, then how can it not be copied? because if it's digital, then you can just keep making copies. And so when he started explaining the blockchain technology to me and the cryptography side of it, it was, in my mind, just something to prove to me that this is a real money alternative before I would be willing to look more into the why of it. I mean, the why as in, not the why, the how it works. I just want to know the truth of it. And so it's actually interesting that he approached it from the mining side, because that the existence of Bitcoin, the fact that you can get Bitcoin or receive Bitcoin as a thing, that was what he was trying to explain to me, even before I think about transactions. Like, how can this thing be real? How can this thing be a money alternative? And he used the blockchain technology in the SHA-256, the mathematical formula and all that stuff, that you can only go one way, not the other way, and go backwards and forwards. The non-replication part of the Bitcoin was what I needed to understand.
Yeah, I find that a lot with not just the wives, but also, you know, a lot of my friends. It's hard for them to understand, like, how is this thing that is quote unquote digital, not physical, able to be verifiably not replicatable, like you said.
Yes.
And that's a tough hurdle for a lot of people. I mean, I think I'm still struggling with my wife to get her to understand how Bitcoin, the how of Bitcoin. And so I think that, you know, what you guys are doing is incredible. And I want to hear a little more about your introduction, Tali, into that. You know, was it something that you were like very, very keen to learn, or was it kind of like you were reserved and you're like, I don't really care, like, whatever?
I was brought into it kicking and screaming, kind of. He kind of elbowed me for a long time while I was finishing up the high school education of my kids in the homeschooling. And when you're homeschooling, you're taking on the role of every person in the school system, right? You're the principal, you're the counselor, you're the teacher, you're the nurse, you're the everybody. And I was trying to graduate them, and I was really busy with just researching colleges, how do homeschoolers prove their credentials and all that stuff. So it was a very, very busy time for us. And of course, you have like the senior plays, and then you have the soccer games that you have to travel for and all that stuff. And so right around that time was when he started to get into Bitcoin. And when he was elbowing me, I'm like, do I look like I have time to go listen to a 2-hour podcast? No, you know, don't give me a 500-page book for me to read. I don't have time to look into it. I don't understand Bitcoin. I don't understand. I'm not a programmer. I almost failed my computer program class when I was in high school. It was a requirement, and I barely scraped by. I almost failed it. So for him to come to me and go, there's this money thing, and it's like a computer programming thing. And oh, by the way, there's like some kind of like mathematical equation associated. I was like, no way, please, you know. And he kept saying, for our kids, for the sake of our kids, we need to understand this so we can teach it to them. And it was because of that, I'm like, fine, just like show me what it is. And I remember he showed me a 10-minute video from a college professor somewhere. He's like, this makes perfect sense. It's going to be so easy after you watch this.
Oh, I love that video. And, I know what she's talking about. It's
and he showed it to me, and I watched it. It was very painful 10 minutes. Okay. I really, God.
Tell us which video it was real quick.
Yeah, please.
It was an MIT video, I believe. And it was basically showing, it started out with how how you try to find a nonce to get a winning block, and then how that creates the hash of that is then included in the next one. And then he just kept layered on multiple transactions to the point where at the end of the video, you understood why this provided security, because you realized that the amount of energy it would take to redo this thing is insane. And that's when the idea of the time chain blockchain, like that's when it started to click for me on why this kind of set of technologies linked together, why it works. And then you realize how brilliant it is to put them together, because it wasn't just one thing that were linked. Yeah. And that video just made it visual for me. That's what I needed, was a visual. And it just said, step one, you're trying to you want to put this into this equation. It's the hash. It's going to be SHA-256, and you want to get below a certain thing. And if it is, it's green. You just change it. Got it. And then it was, okay, let's add something to this. Let's take the last hash plus a transaction. Okay, let's do this. And then it just built up. In my view, this was a brilliant presentation of it. In 10 minutes, you could explain mining. And that wasn't the case for other people I showed it to.
You're shaking your head over there, Tali. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I remember I watched it with our son, our youngest. I think he was, I don't know, 13 or 14 at the time. And he is into computer programming. He was at the time learning C++ or something. So Scott was so excited. He's like, if you would just watch this thing with your mom, you're going to really understand the importance of Bitcoin and what it is. So the two of us watched it. And both of us were like, what the heck is this thing? I was so frustrated. He was like, can I leave now? And it just made no sense to us. It was not happening. But he wouldn't give up. He kept saying, we have to learn this for the sake of our kids.
You don't have to know how the Bernoulli principle works to fly in a plane. You don't have to know how combustion works to drive a car. You don't have to know computer programming to send an email. But the thing is, I
wasn't convinced by the video that this is a thing that's real and that I should pay attention to it.
So what finally convinced you that Bitcoin is a real thing, even though it's non-physical?
Okay, so he spent 2 years creating this game to explain it to me. And during the 2-year time, he would make prototype after prototype to try to say, like, he would bring out, be like, here's another prototype. And I'll be like, oh my God. And then I'll have to play it because I'm supposed to be supportive. And then somewhere in the process, I finally said, okay, fine, just show me one of your darn books and I will listen to it on Audible on 2X. And he thought that I was going to listen to the Bitcoin Standard. But I actually didn't end up listening to the Bitcoin Standard. I listened to Bitcoin Hard Money You Can't F With by Jason Williams. And it was an accident. I don't even know how it got on our Audible list, but I was listening to it and I would get so angry that I would come home and tell him, because I would be listening to it when I'm at the gym. I'd be like, I heard this thing and I'm just really upset. And he goes, I don't remember that in the Bitcoin Standard, because he didn't listen to his other book. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but yes, you should be angry.
Yes, that's it.
You should be angry. And so I listened to the whole book. It took me several months, actually. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, I really need to pay attention to this thing, because what I recognized was all the problems with the fiat system. And if he said this is an alternative to it, I'm like, fine, I will research. I'll look into it. So the second book I read was called Inventing Bitcoin, which are into more technical. And what I was able to do was I read the book, and I listened to the book. It was on Audible. And as I was listening to the book, I could see the game, the different parts of the game playing out in my mind. And because of that, it makes sense. And then from there, I went straight down the rabbit hole, and I was listening to podcasts now. And I was I listened to Bitcoin Audible a lot. And I did go ahead and read some of the other books that he recommended. But until then, I was just like, no.
And I knew she was in when she said for our anniversary, let's go to the Bitcoin conference.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you overcame a ton of friction with family to get them orange pilled. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious, like, you dove into these books probably at the incessant urging of Scott over a couple of years, it sounds like. And you finally were like, all right, I'll listen to this while I'm working out.
It's close to it. It's pretty close to it.
So, I mean, but that's still like, I don't know, that's a lovely gesture, Tali, from you.
Thank you.
But it's funny now. It's funny for me because now when we talk to the kids and they think that we're just in this laser-eyed cult. And they don't understand why we're spending literally all of our time going to meetups and conferences and building products. And hey, guys, we're going to go do an interview and a podcast. The kids just roll their head. They're just like, okay, whatever. Mom and dad are going to disappear for a couple hours and whatever.
Yeah. They'll figure it out eventually.
And I'm like, okay, shoes on the other foot right now, isn't it? You're all excited and they think you're crazy. So,
yeah. What I'm hearing is that, at the end of the day, it might take time, but there's hope for all the wives out there. Because I'll tell you what, my wife, like I wouldn't say she hates Bitcoin, but she hates hearing about Bitcoin. Every time I talk about it, and now this, it's my job, it's my life. It's consumed everything that I do. I'll turn any normal conversation I'll spin it with a Bitcoin spin. And my wife, every single time she hears the conversation start heading that way, she rolls her eyes, turns her head, and starts paying attention to something else. So I'm hearing that there's hope.
It is a low time preference thing, number one.
Yeah.
You don't want to turn them off. Two, though, you think about the emotion, though, that you get when you're following a story. And if you're regurgitating facts because you have an engineering background or whatever it is, you're making it worse. You're actually shutting people down by just trying to vomit all your memes on them about, staying poor and whatever else you want to throw at them. It doesn't convince somebody, oh, let me listen to this guy who's throwing all these facts at me.
Right.
But if you have a story and you say, this is how someone was unbanked and they were able to bank. If this is a story of someone who in a country that was going through hyperinflation and what they did, if you could tie it to something that they care about, that's different.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to mention, Trevor, that once I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and I started traveling with Scott to these Bitcoin gatherings, I noticed that there were very, very few spouses or girlfriends or partners at these Bitcoin meetups. And if it did come, they were in the corner scrolling on their phone because they don't care, or they feel like they don't fit in, or they just don't understand. And because of that, I started a podcast called Orange Hatter, and it's literally just stories of women and why they care about Bitcoin. That's it. We don't go into technical stuff. We don't get sarcastic about like what's going on in the government and the fiat system. None of that. Is just, what kind of person are you? What is your background, cultural, age, education, economic levels? It doesn't matter. So I get a really great sense of their background in a story form. And then, how did you come across Bitcoin? What does it matter to you? And that's it. Because there's going to be, you got to have your wife, in your case, identify with something that the woman is, and then think, if she cares about Bitcoin, then maybe there's something to it, instead of the way that the engineer likes to go about it, which is, these are the facts, the money printing is this, inflation has gone up, blah, 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 housing has increased, pricing, blah, 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 and Bitcoin is the savior, is going to come and save the day. Like,
we call that mansplaining.
Yes. Yes.
No, that's awesome.
Women need it differently.
Well,
exactly.
If you really want adoption and you really care about the kids, then you're going to have to reach them in a way that they accept the world.
Yeah.
So you mentioned music. It could be story. It could be games. It could be whatever it is. You can't assume that they're going to accept those types of concepts the way that you learned about them. And if that's what we want to do, we're going to have to take their point of view and just say, what is it that's influencing them? And we can get to, if you wanted to, we can go down the homeschooling route. If you're they're not going to teach you that kind of stuff in a public school.
Right. Yeah.
They may not even teach that in a private school. So it's not just self-custodying education. It's just self-custodying parenting. And what are you going to teach? And then now you're in our territory where how do I get through to these little minds that have a very, very different view in the world? It's completely different.
I want to definitely touch on like how you after reaching Tali, you started probably trying to reach the kids, and but before we go there, did you guys, or either of you or both of you, have there's precursors, there's cognitive or philosophical, ideological precursors for many people who grab onto the Bitcoin concept?
Yeah.
You could say free market economics or libertarianism, small L libertarianism, or whatever that people have in their backgrounds. And then it kind of gives them a foot in the door already so that the Bitcoin message can land for them. And so did either of you have that type of background or any of these precursors?
I did. I'll let Tali speak for herself, but I mean, I had read Creature from Jekyll Island a million years ago. I had read Atlas Shrugged, so I love the whole Ayn Rand objectivism type of things. And then politically, I felt very patriotic, and the idea of big government I just cringed with it. So for me, I look back now and I can see the pieces.
Right. Yeah, that's so many people have been touched by some of these other adjacent ideas in their backgrounds that makes it easier to welcome the concept of Bitcoin for them. But Tali, did you have any of those kind of precursors at all in your background? Those kind of, critical of big government, or just, been hurt by a bank or anything like that?
Becoming a Bitcoiner before Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I'm an immigrant. And so growing up, we were always under the impression that if you worked really hard, if you studied really hard, you got into good schools and you got a good job, then you were okay. You go for the security, right? You go for the 5 career choices, the only 5 career choices available to an immigrant child. You have medicine, you have law, you have business, computing, and then probably, not entrepreneurship, engineering. Those were the 5 choices. And if you didn't like the 5, too bad, pick one. And because security is number 1. And we, if you've read our background, we graduated from the business school at Yale. And so we checked off all the boxes. We studied hard, we went to good school, et cetera, et cetera. And when in 2008, when that first crisis happened, and it affected the town that we lived in, which is basically the whole town was Goodyear. And they laid off, 4,000 people or something in the same town. I was so frustrated that I didn't understand why it was happening. Because you have all these news stories about like March on Wall Street and all that stuff. But I was trained to believe in Wall Street. I was supposed to work on Wall Street, right? So I was so stuck. I didn't understand. And it just kind of simmered there. And right around that time was when we got into Rich Dad Poor Dad, where you have the quadrant. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. And so the unfair taxation setup, because that's what he cares about, right? Like if you are an investor, you're taxed the lowest. If you are an income, like an employee, you're taxed the highest. And then if you have your own business, like accountants and lawyers, you're taxed even higher than that. And so the whole structure was so plain in front of us how unfair the system was. And that's just taxation. That's not even going into the inflation stuff. And so when I started hearing stories from Jason Williams' book, like all of these lights just started flashing from my memory of stuff that we worked for, things that we believed in, things that crashed down on us, and what we see in the marketplace and what we see in our neighbors' lives and our families' lives, just like everything just made sense finally.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, if I could jump in, that's the reason that we're so passionate about sharing with others. If you really take a low time preference view, the infinite game, you go into any way you want to say it, but if you really care about the next generation, we were checking all the boxes. We went to a good school, but we followed the fiat path. We had the fiat job. We had all this debt, and then we ended up losing our house, and it was painful, really painful. And never mind the fact that it's embarrassing. You're also thinking, how do I make sure this doesn't happen to our kids? If we went supposedly to this program that was going to make us top notch, whatever, in terms of finance or money or management, whatever it is, and we've made all these mistakes, how do we teach our kids?
Right.
And that's really scary. That's more scary than anything is having to face your own family.
Yeah.
So that's why it's, once you put the Bitcoin umbrella over it, for me, then it was Austrian economics and low time preference and all these other things. And now all of a sudden you can get into food and energy literacy and all the other things that are wrong. And you realize it's not just Bitcoin that I need to teach the kids. I need to help the kids understand this basic framework on how things work. And if I really want the best for them, how do I get those points across? And now it's not just challenging to teach them Bitcoin. Now it's challenging to you have so many things to get across, so many ideas.
Yep.
But the impact of them understanding that could be huge in terms of their happiness and success versus not. So
well, it's interesting the way that you frame that. I see Bitcoin, like, yes, Bitcoin is a protocol. It's, it's a cool technology, but there's an ethos around Bitcoin, and it encompasses so many different aspects of life and just trying to find yourself and understand how the world works. I think that what you guys are doing, teaching your kids all these different concepts and trying to explain to them how the world works, how it really works, is teaching them about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin plays a role in that without ever saying the word Bitcoin. And I think that, based on your story, based on what you guys are kind of explaining, that's one of the best ways to incept the idea of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's over here. You got all these other ideas over here, but you don't have to say Bitcoin to bring them up to speed and tell them what Bitcoin is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. And there's so much more to that. It also gives you, it's a purpose in life. You're following this and you're saying, I'm going to do this. And now I have found that because I like games, that happens to be one way that I can communicate with others. So we're launching Channel Up this year. You can see it behind me here. That's all based on how layer 2 Lightning works. And BIP39 is based on seed phrases. And then next year we're launching Fed Up, which is going to talk about, of course, Federal Reserve, right? So you got Huddle Up, Channel Up, Fed Up. And there's so much material to teach that this isn't just a single game. This isn't just, hey, Scott created Huddle Up and that's it. And it isn't just Bitcoin. It's really a lot of other things. There's so much work to do in terms of getting these things across. And Tali has started now with the early reader series. We're doing the Bitcoin Homeschoolers podcast together. We go to homeschooling conferences as well as Bitcoin conferences. And there's a whole series of games that we're going to come out, because if you think about all these other areas that I know you guys have heard about with other conversations, that's all things that we're looking at and saying, these concepts, we need many tools, because everybody learns differently. We don't need just one course. We don't need one game. We actually need this army of offerings, because you're going to reach people differently.
But also I want to add to that, from our experience, it just feels like money is such a big part of people's identity. And if you challenge their money, you're challenging their identity. And it's a hard wall to climb over. So if you say, hey, let me talk about Bitcoin as a money alternative, all kinds of alarm bells are going off in their head. But if you say, let me talk to you about just the Fed, or let me talk to you about, your child going to the store, like, okay, let me go back. One of the things that I wanted to kind of sneak in the concept is just the idea of inflation. And right now there's a lot of bailouts. We still have, depending on the person, you still have your credit card you can swipe. So if you only was working with cash only, you would feel the pain a lot more with more sting. But right now, a lot of us still have cushion. We can swipe our credit card and just build up that balance. It's a little bit scary, but you can still use it. Or in the case of the government, they're just printing more money or whatever. But let's say it's a child and he's saving up money for like old-fashioned way, right? You don't just get it immediately because your parents are like, oh, let me swipe my credit card, but you're actually saving up money. You save up money, you get to the point where you're like, yes, I can go buy this thing that I've been saving up for. You get to the store and the thing has increased in price and now you still can't buy it. Now, what do parents usually do? Well, I'll match you the difference and you can buy it. But what if the parents didn't do that? Suddenly the inflation is very stark. It's in their face. And so that's sort of the ideas that I want to share with our reading books, because again, if you go at people, like frontal attack is the way I see it. Like, let me tell you about Bitcoin. You're probably going to have some door slammed in your face. But if you say, let me show you this children's story, it's really cute, and you just read it and let them feel the light bulb, like, oh my gosh, that is so true. It's actually happening right now. We say we can't save up for things anymore. It makes no difference. You can't ever buy anything if you save up stuff. You have to swipe with your credit card now. It feels like. And so then it's like, okay, all right, let's just ding that light bulb. And then if you talk about the big format with a different game or a different book, and then it's another light bulb. And when you have enough light bulbs go off, then they're going to be like, okay, now tell me about Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's something I noticed with again, like I mentioned, these kind of precursor ideas that people have been exposed to. Some of them are just like interests. Some of them are painful or fearful experiences, like the one you just described for a little kid saving up for something they want and the price goes up. Or, I always think about the banking crisis in Cyprus back in 2013. That really helped us as meetup organizers in those early days explain the importance of Bitcoin through this, this experience that many of them, being in the US, they weren't having that experience, but they could certainly empathize when they heard about bank bail-ins and haircuts on these savings accounts and seeing the riots and stuff, over this, overseas happening. So, those kinds of other experiences will open people up to listening a little bit deeper to you about, all right, maybe this thing you're talking about could be a solution, or at least it's interesting. And that's, I think, a great tool. And so you got Tali on board, Scott. You're developing these games. She's reading books and listening to podcasts, and then kind of gets on board. And then you still have teenage kids, right, at this time. And so at what point, if ever, did you get them interested in learning a little bit, or maybe what could be considered enough about Bitcoin for their age level? Or, how do they feel about Bitcoin based on your work and based on your history so far?
They're definitely not completely orange pilled. They're not all the way there. And I would say
they think they're in a cult.
No, I do
think we're in a cult.
I think they're opening up though. I do think because they're willing to come to events with us. For example, if I need help with a game event or something, they'll come to it. If we need help with, so we've pulled them into different aspects of it. So our youngest, who's good with computer renderings, we asked him, can you help us with a how-to video and make some of the videos that I shared with you guys? One of our daughters was more on the theatric side, and we asked her, can you help out with the beginning of the podcast? And I asked another son, can you help out with game testing? You don't have to understand Bitcoin, just help me test it. And they've met other people in the space now. And I think it's just a matter of time as they realize these are just like everybody else. These people are like everybody else, and it's been slow. Yeah. So I think it's a spectrum.
After I read my first Bitcoin book, I did tell all 4 kids about it. And this again is at the beginning. I think this is at the beginning of their college career, and so they were all really busy. And only 1 out of the 4 read the book, the Bitcoin Heart Money You Can Have It book. And right after that, she said, "Well, Mom, I think I'm going to put all of my summer earnings into Bitcoin." So would I call her a Bitcoiner? No, because she only read 1 book, but she did in that summer, this is a few summers ago, put all of her savings into Bitcoin.
She's a Bitcoiner in my opinion.
She's a Bitcoiner. Okay, so
I agree.
If you ask her,
say it, yeah. But
she's just going along with what Mom wants for a moment. And
another daughter, I roped her in to help me edit my podcast. And again, as I was telling Trevor earlier, they were all just women's stories. And when you're editing podcasts, you're listening to the same interview like 5 times because you're, making all these, minute changes and stuff. And I remember after she had done like 4 or 5 interviews for me, we were chatting in the kitchen one day. And I said, "So do you think you might want to put some money in Bitcoin?" She goes, "Yeah, I guess I will, because all these other women were talking about it. So it must be a real thing." Not because Mom and Dad are in it, but because she heard other women talk about it.
Well, they're not going to listen to Mom and Dad.
No. So, and then our youngest, when Bitcoin was like really shooting up, he was like, "Well, that's interesting. Let me maybe put some money into it." But in his mind, he hasn't done any research. He's just going in there because numbers go up. So I really wouldn't call him a Bitcoiner. No. And another son, actually, an interesting story. I was trying to get him to get his coworkers to do a game night because we really want to tell these young people who are just starting out in their lives to learn about Bitcoin. And he's like, "Oh no, nobody's going to be interested. My boss is not interested. Nobody's interested." And then his boss actually reaches out to us several months after that and say, "Hey, can you help me set up my wallet?" And I went to my son like, "Did you say that nobody at work believes in Bitcoin? Because, this person called." And he was like, "Oh, So there's
Mhm.
subtle changes in all of their attitudes.
There's
Subtle.
progress. There's
There's
definitely
progress.
progress.
They're
And
seeing it all around them. Yeah.
I think bringing them to any events they're willing to join you at is a great way to do it. And that's why, we want to take this moment here to remind everybody in the audience about the Mining Conference. We are putting on a conference this fall to basically energize people and help people coordinate and network exclusively about Bitcoin mining. The event's going to be in Brainerd, Minnesota. It's on September 27th through 29th this fall. And basically, we're just going to bring a bunch of people together, 300 to 500 guests, and a bunch of industry leaders already online to speak at the event, builders from all over the Bitcoin mining industry, recognizable names and faces, and people coming out of the woodwork who, aren't very public, generally speaking. But this will be a great place to network, meet like-minded people, learn about how to build your own Bitcoin mine, how to get started with Bitcoin mining, or just understanding it more deeply, and the challenges that currently face it in terms of regulation, in terms of, Bitcoin price challenges we're having right now. A lot of miners are struggling with that, and just how to navigate that effectively so you can be sustainable and stay in the game. And so we want you to come to the Mining Conference. We're also going to have at the event a Build a Mine crash course. We usually have a 3-day boot camp a couple times a year in Wisconsin, where we bring people to basically get a crash course over the course of 3 days, a boot camp of sorts, to learn how to start building their Bitcoin mine. We're going to do a 1-day event. It'll be a compressed event. It's the first of its kind and one of a kind. So that will be available at this conference event as well. A 1-day boot camp to learn how to build your own Bitcoin mine and take your mining game to the next level. So please mark your calendars. Go to the website, theminingconference.com, and secure your tickets today. Let's build the future of Bitcoin mining together. Again, it's September 27th through 29th. You can go to theminingconference.com or bitcoinminingworld.com to learn more. And we will, at the end of the show, we'll have a special little gift for you guys, Scott and Tali. So we'll talk about that toward the end of our rip here today. But yes, we want everyone to take a peek at the event. And it's a great location, honestly, a vacation, family-oriented type of spot. Brainerd, Minnesota is around a bunch of beautiful lakes, and you couldn't pick a better, kind of wonderful spot to bring your family to a conference, which is sometimes hard to do at some of these events. Although I'm seeing more and more family-oriented side events at large Bitcoin conferences, and certainly this one is geared to have your family at the whole thing. So we'd love people to consider that.
And something that Will didn't mention to all you new guys, I'm a new Bitcoiner. So all you new Bitcoiners, if you're looking to get a job in the industry, this is a great place for you to come to so that you can find other people that are, looking for positions to fill. So don't forget about that as well.
Yeah, but professional networking is massive opportunity at really any conference. But if you're interested specifically in Bitcoin mining, this is the one to check out. So yeah, with that, I know you. So you guys bring your kids to conferences. You're slowly bringing them along, orange pilling them, and like you said, Scott, it's a low time preference exercise to kind of bring people along. And this is kind of where you come from with building these different games to reach people. But I kind of want to dig a little deeper into how you expose people to Bitcoin to kind of latch on to some of these precursors they may have in their experience, in their backgrounds, without mentioning Bitcoin at all, and just kind of talk about the strategy there and some of the most effective ways that you guys do that and some of the products that you guys have developed to do that.
Well, the thing that comes to mind first and foremost is learn when to shut up. And we saw this firsthand when we would take the game around, or when we first started to bring the game to actual Bitcoin locations and meetups. Because initially all my playtesting was with family who were not Bitcoiners. And they would ask me a question: can you send to yourself? And I'd be, I don't know. And I had to go do research, and I'd come back and say, oh, let me tell you about coin joins. And they didn't care about that, but I would say, okay, yes. And then I would go to the next thing. When we first started bringing it out, and I could watch other people, how they were reacting using my game, and watching someone take my game and try to explain to someone that was a pre-coiner, and they just would dump information on them. And I'm like, oh my God, is that what I look like? Is that what I look like when I'm doing that?
Yes.
Is that why the kids are? And the answer, of course, is absolutely. That's exactly what I look like. So the biggest lesson is knowing when to actually just be quiet and wait for someone else to ask the questions. In the case of the game, there are so many things in that game that if you just said, listen, we're going to play a game. It's 45 minutes. It'll take you 15 minutes to learn it. So this is a bring another couple over kind of a bet. And we're just going to play a game. And you don't, they might see that there's bees on there and the rules and things we'll talk about wallets and mining and whatnot. But there's nothing in there that says you have to understand Bitcoin. It's just a game. But if they ask you what's a halving, what's a difficulty, or what's a whatever, cold storage versus a hot wallet, okay, that's your opportunity to then you could start to do it. But let them take the lead with the question, and you be quiet. That's far and away the hardest thing I have to do is to learn when to not be in dad lecture mode.
Yeah, it's tough for dads.
It's really
get ready, Trevor.
I'm already there. I catch myself, man. I'll be in a conversation with my wife, and again, like I said before, I'll turn any conversation into Bitcoin, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I gotta stop.
So yeah, having some self-reflection early on in your Bitcoin journey and being able to kind of just have a little bit of that awareness or self-control to kind of pump the brakes a tiny bit, and let people bring themselves along with you is huge. Now, as someone who's been in the space for 11 years now, I don't know, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a very easy time kind of backing off and just letting people come to me or ask the questions and only answer the questions and don't take them on a long diatribe. And that might be because I've been in the space so long. It might just because I'm, seeing the value in the silence or letting them bring themselves along. But yeah, it takes time.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I would like. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to say to Will's point, you can also, if someone does say, "Oh, you're into Bitcoin. I see you have a B on your shirt," or something like that. Don't assume you have the response ready for them. I would ask a follow-up question and try to figure out where they're coming from. If they're coming from, I'm just looking for making some money on the side, and I don't really care about sound money versus non-sound money, and you start to go down the latter path, you're just addressing the wrong audience with it. And so you're wasting their time and you're wasting your own precious time. Okay.
Everything's good. Don't worry.
Okay. I'm like, where the heck did they go?
No,
right.
You're good.
But don't, it's just, if you can get more information on what's important to them, if their kid's future is important to them, then you can talk about how understanding how money works and inflation and things will impact them. If they're very human rights oriented, you can go the Alex Gladstein type of route. If they literally have extra money and they're learning, or they want to learn how to save, well, you can talk about DCA and vehicles for that. If they're technical, maybe they want to do coding and stuff. That's a very different conversation. But if you can get any information on what interests them, then that'll save you both a lot of frustration.
Yeah. Another thing which I think has worked for me in recent years is it's along the lines of what you said. You just kind of learn when to shut up. Usually I'll be introduced in, professional events or social events or community events that have nothing to do with Bitcoin. I'll be introduced as the Bitcoin guy, or, this is Will. He's into, he works on Bitcoin or works in Bitcoin or whatever. He works for Bitcoin. People, don't know how to differentiate it. But usually early on, you're very tempted to be like, oh yeah, now here, blah, let me spew at you. Right. But lately, and for years now, I guess I've just been like, yeah, yep. And I just wait. If they want to ask more questions about it, I'm happy to let them. But we don't have to talk about it, guys, like just let them kind of hear it. Cause that's really what it did for me. And granted, it was very early on. There was nowhere near the amount of resources, let alone the amount of great teachers and proselytizers that we have nowadays, or even, 5-6 years ago when I was learning about it. But I did keep hearing it. I heard the word and I was like, that's interesting. I know what people are using it for. I understand, computers and they're, so like I kept hearing it. And finally I was like, you know what? I keep hearing about this thing. I am going to actually dive in and see what it's all about, And so that works. So like, I think these are great words of wisdom about how to reach people. And then, I never developed any tools beyond some presentations for work related reasons about Bitcoin, or to just make the meetup programming a little bit more engaging, with some actual agenda or programming, like a presentation or an interview or whatever. So those are the kinds of products I developed early on to explain to people, but you guys developed actual games. So I want to give you guys time to explain a little bit more about each of the games you have so far that are available, or any ones that are new to launch soon, and like what they specifically teach around which aspects of Bitcoin, if you would.
And I'll add on to that. I want to know, like, what has the reaction been, when you take these games to different places and you play the games with, normies, what is their reaction to the game?
All right, let me do your question first, Trevor. Back to Will. It depends on your audience. If your audience is actual pre-coiners, we went to a meetup, for example, and it was the meetup, a little bit more rural area. It was actually in a church because the church pastor was part of the meetup, and it was pizza day with kids, basically. And you have all these families running around and little kids running around. It was just a game. They just got to play a game, and some of those that follow Bitcoin there liked it because now their family's interacting with something that says the word Bitcoin, and they hear their kids say, "You better put your Bitcoin in cold storage." Really happy for that. We've taken to meetups on that same thing where we've said we've gone to as visitors to another meetup, and we say, when you advertise that we're going to do this game night, tell them to bring a guest like their significant other, and then you'll see them pair up, because some are more shy than others. And so maybe it's often the woman, but just imagine it's a couple there, and they're both playing with the same cards. So they have to talk about what they're going to do. And it lowers that inhibition about just being thrown into this whatever competitive game that they see. The other side, the other kind of audience, are people who already know Bitcoin. So when we go to places like BitBlock Boom or somewhere else, or Bitcoin Park, and it's all Bitcoiners, they get competitive. They're talking smack to each other. They want to put real sats on the line, and it is the opposite. It's 100% Bitcoin talk. They're making all kinds of suggestions for how to improve the game. So,
let's share an example with them, specifically with normies.
Go for it.
So, for example, we went to an event, and it was supposed to be a tech talk, a tech presentation. And for whatever reason that day, the computer wasn't cooperating, or Tor wasn't cooperating or something, and they couldn't do the presentation. And a group of people had already gathered. We had our game with us, and we were like, okay, anybody interested in playing the game? Well, at the time, do I need to? Okay. Yeah. At the time, we noticed that there was a girlfriend of one of the regular attendees, and he's super, super tech savvy. And she was sitting there, body posture very closed off. Her facial expression wasn't engaging anybody. And she was just like, she was physically there, but mentally she was somewhere else. And so she was invited to play the game, and she was really apprehensive. She was like, I don't know Bitcoin. I don't understand anything. I don't think I can play this game. And her partner said, no, it's okay. I'm going to tell you what to do. So we sit down, and the game is set up, and he's whispering in her ear, right? Every move that she's making, he's explaining things and whispering in her ear. Well, by halfway through the game, her hand came up like this, literally in front of his face. And she's like, I got it. Don't tell me anymore. I'm going to play the rest of the game myself. By the end of the game, she said, I want to buy this game. I want to buy with Bitcoin, and I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to show me, but I want to do it. So then he walked her through the Lightning wallet. So from completely closed off, not interested whatsoever, to show me how to use a wallet, 45 minutes.
Wow.
And that's the power. You know, that she had, of course, nuggets of information that he's been telling her, but nothing really fell into place until she saw it on the board. And we've actually had other women say the same thing to us. Like, you know, I knew all this stuff, but it didn't really make any sense to me until I saw it. And I experienced it through the, you know, from the Genesis block to like the last block that was mined. And they're like, oh, that's what this whole thing is about. And we've had some people say their girlfriend played the game, and then after that went home and told them we should buy some more Bitcoin. Because you know, like the concepts are so
when you've got your significant other telling you to buy more Bitcoin, it is such
you're gonna feel good.
Ears,
Trevor's imagining that right now.
I can't relate. I can't. You know, she's like, why are you spending this money?
We'll help you out. But Will, just let me go back real quick to your question. So we have 4 games currently. We actually have a very long time frame. We have a long time frame. Every year we're going to introduce another first principle game. So the game I had made when the kids were young was basically about pricing and now I understand it's Austrian economics. At the time I didn't have the right vocabulary for it. And that one's called Is That the Best You Can Do? And it's just a simple negotiation game. You have supply cards and demand cards, and then kids go back and forth. The value is subjective, somewhere in between those.
Well, it also demonstrates a free market price negotiation versus market forces like government taxation. So it's very like stark, very in your face. You can see it right away how it moves price artificially.
Would you guys say that game is like a good game, like a good starting point, like a good first game to play?
I always want to know who I'm advising. If you've got kids in the, I would say 5 to 10-year-old range, maybe 5.
I think he's talking about his wife.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. I think
start with the podcast.
I would just do Huddle Up. I would just do Huddle Up, the one we were talking about, because it has 21 million Bitcoin in the game. It has halvings in the game that are very visual. It has the visual split between the cold wallet and the hot wallet side. It has all the basic elements that do you really care that if your wife understands how the hash function works, like how the process works, or how
I just want her on board when I buy Bitcoin.
Right. They don't. Right. Or wouldn't it be nice if she just understood that the halving's a big deal and it has to do with this issuance schedule on the time chain? Okay, that's pretty cool. And that cold storage is better than something on a hot wallet. Okay. If they know that, that's awesome. They already know more than 99% of the population. And I would recommend, if you're asking that question for your significant other, I would say that Huddle Up, because we actually label it. We say this is a Bitcoin mining game. So literally it is the issuance schedule that is the board. So all 21 million are on there and it's issued, and then there's a halving. Sorry for the noise. That's our dog joining the podcast. So you have this very visual impact of seeing the halvings, and we always call it out when we tell people, hey guys, this is the last block of the epoch, and you make it really like in their face and go, ooh, yeah, maybe I should mine right now instead of doing some other action in
That's
the game.
Cool.
So you have all kinds of fun lessons that are built into that. I would start with Huddle Up. Channel Up is layer 2. You want to be the first player to buy 2 pizzas with Bitcoin. And you have to do that by opening and closing your Lightning nodes and your Lightning channels and balancing your liquidity and the routing payments that go through your nodes. You get basically you get a fee. That's how you build up your Bitcoin, and then you can buy your pizza with that. I found that game to be much more difficult, believe it or not, to try to explain Lightning than to try to explain Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was already hard enough, but I found Lightning to be really, really challenging. And when Tali did it, you only played once, right? Twice, maybe. Mm-hmm. She looked at me like I was crazy with all these pieces out. But if you play that game one time, I guarantee the next time someone mentions inbound, outbound liquidity, splicing in and out, opening and closing channels, you'll understand the context of what they're talking about. BIP 39 is the third. Wait, am I 4? That's 4th game. That's based on seed phrases. So I actually went through the BIP39 list. It's over 2,000. I forget the exact number. I built categories for it and tried to find some that would make a good deck of cards. And animals happen to work really nicely. And basically, one person is designated the oracle. So imagine I say, "Hey, Will, it's like Pictionary. You know the answer. Now you got to draw it for everybody else." Somebody knows that they pick 3 cards out of this deck and they place them in order. And then other players are going to ask questions trying to figure out what it is. And not only do they have to figure out what 3 animals you picked, but they have to get the right order. So everybody has the same deck of cards with the same list. You can learn it in 5 minutes. It's like learning Pictionary. You literally can do that game in 5 minutes. It's a lot of fun because you're talking about animals, and it turns out a lot of us don't know a lot about animals, right? It's actually pretty revealing. The one that I don't have it on the website yet, but I will soon. The one we're launching in 2025 is going to be Fed Up. And that's basically about trying to end the Federal Reserve and Clown World. It's also going to be kind of a party game.
I love it.
I don't have all the rules worked out on that. And then
it's slightly more physical.
Cool.
Yeah. So a couple just hints of how creative you can get with these things. One is every year I'm going to make a special edition of Huddle Up in the spirit of low time preference art type of. There's a whole group of people in Bitcoin that like that. As a gamer, I wanted to do something. So I made a version of Huddle Up with metal pieces on it and neoprene mat. We call it the 2024 Halving Edition. And once I sell out, I'm done. But if you have a super low time preference, this is a collector's piece. And so every year I'm going to do another one versus the standard version is sort of like I went to the store and I got a Catan that's, it's basically cardboard. We'll make that one forever. And then the other thing that we're doing, especially from the education side, is we're looking how we can try to get to the digital side. I like the fellowship of in-person games. There's a lot of benefits to that we didn't talk about today, but a lot of benefits of game playing happens to be you're not looking at a screen. We're not watching your phone. We're not watching the TV. We're actually interacting. However, there are a lot of frictions with the supply chain. And if we're going to look at this from an education standpoint, imagine if we had Huddle Up that was free to use. You could play anywhere in the world. You could translate it to any language, link it to real sats, like real wallets, and link it to education in your language, like the Me Premier Pro diploma in different languages. So that's not ready to launch yet, but those are examples of other things that we are working on to try to increase impact. So
that's amazing.
Bottom line is
yeah.
impact.
Yeah. I mean, just since you've gone through your description of the products that you have available, I want you to kind of tell everyone where they can find you and, give kind of the plugs and all of that. And then after you do that, Trevor has some kind of fun philosophical, Trevor's favorite part of the show. We wrap up with some cool kind of personal or introspective type questions. So please plug your sites, your socials. Let folks know where they can learn more about the games. They can maybe read some rules and just kind of find you guys, buy the products, and so on. So go ahead.
You want me that one? You want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
FreeMarketKids.com is where we'll have links to all the games, whether they're made yet or not. And we're Free Market Kids on Twitter. My personal handle is Scott Lindberg 93. So both of those handles, you can reach me. Tali's at Orange Hatter Pod on Twitter. We can send you guys we're not going to read the Nostr links to you, but we can give those to you to plug in or put into your.
We'll put all of your contact info in the show notes, all the website links and social usernames so that folks can find you guys. But just go ahead and throw them all out there anyway.
So on the site, then we'll also have links to, for example, Orange Hatter and the women's podcast, the women's retreat, women's reading group, mastermind, all these things that Tali's doing,
and the new young reader books.
Young reader books. The links will be there. We also have links to the Bitcoin Homeschooler podcast, or you could just go to bitcoinhomeschoolers.com. Either way, you can get to our podcast. That's where we're trying to share more practical, fundamental tips on people who are trying to self-custody education and have young kids or soon to be young kids, Trevor. You can start to prepare now. So we're going to continue to put out content there. And then, of course, we attend as many in-person events as we can get to. So we're going to be in Nashville. We are going to be at the Unconference, which is the day before Industry Day. It's focused on Bitcoin educators. It is a high signal. It's 150 people max. It's an awesome event. And then we'll be in multiple places at the big conference itself. So we love to meet people in person. If this gets out in time for people to come say hi to us in Nashville, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we can do something about that, I think, Trevor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one more time, real quick, for the websites. It's freemarketkids.com.
Mhm.
It's bitcoinhomeschool.com.
Homeschoolers.
Bitcoinhomeschoolers.com. And then the event,
Orangehatter.com.
orangehatter.com. And did you have a website for the event as well?
The event, for the Unconference, that's actually on the Me Premier Bitcoin site. So if you go to Me Premier, I think it's .io, and then you'll see a little flyer for that. You click on that, it has more details on that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, folks at home, hopefully will check all those links out. And yeah, now to Trevor for his favorite part of the show.
My favorite part of the show. Okay, so I hope I think we have time for both of these questions.
Oh, yeah.
Keep it relatively short. So I want to ask you guys, Tali, Scott, what is something, and it can be, about Bitcoin, it can be about life, it can be about, mining, whatever it is. What is something that keeps you guys up at night?
Jeez.
Inflation?
Yeah. Besides the dogs. Well, geez, that is I should have done my homework and known that you were going to ask this question. No,
I can answer that.
Yeah, go
for
for
me
it.
personally, I feel a great urgency to share the knowledge that we have in a way that's most receptive to people who are not currently thinking along the line. And that's why we're trying to reach people from all different angles with the Young Reader books, to maybe reach the kids and the mom. Because if the dad is the Bitcoiner and the mom is the one who's reading, the mom will get some information.
Well,
the different podcasts, the games. Like I personally feel a sense of urgency to just share the information as fast as possible.
I feel the urgency too, and I think it's stress about a lot of the things in the fiat world. So you look at clown world with the elections, with the economy. We went to the homeschooling conference this year in Cincinnati, and the attendance was way, way down. And my concern
That's so weird. Homeschooling is like way up.
No, the homeschooling's way up, but you think about disposable income right now, especially if you're a single income family, and you have to start cutting back on things. So can you find that curriculum online, for example? And so ironically, if that's the reason that that the attendance was lower, if that's the reason people didn't show up, the very people we need to reach are stressed because of what we're trying to teach about. So the very people we need to get this message to about how money works. And because for the homeschooling audience, you don't start with Bitcoin, you start with money. You start with money literacy. And so I see that what's happening, and I look at that and the sense of urgency and the very people we need to reach are the ones that are so overwhelmed right now. And they're the hardest to reach.
And I think the question is, how do we share this knowledge en masse, like to as many people simultaneously as possible?
Well, yeah, but he just asked what kept us up at night. And
I'm just saying, that keeps me up at night.
If you look at clown world and how bad things are, and then I guess the second half of that, if I could, Trevor, is the hardest thing that I struggle with is how do I maintain a positive mental attitude when I get sucked into the Twitterverse, the newsverse, the whatever verse, the fiat clown world, the high time preference stuff. How do I make sure I keep myself in the right frame of mind so that I can keep working on these other important things like we've been talking about? And I often get sucked in. It's really hard to not get sucked in. And that
I feel that
it only hurts our ability to make an impact and tell people about these other
I feel that, especially as someone who, I'm going to be a new dad. Like I said, I feel a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to be the provider but not only to provide like the safety and the structure, but also like a good, positive life and a positive outlook. So I definitely can resonate with that. And Tali, I resonate with your answer as well, because, we really have to incept these ideas into the hearts and minds of other people. Otherwise, we're just that single guy or woman standing on a rock, shouting to the mountaintop, and nobody's listening. So I definitely feel like those are big tasks, but at the end of the day, we're gonna make it happen. I as Marty Bent likes to say, we got white pills all over the place. We're gonna white pill the world. So the last question I have for you, and this is my favorite question to ask people, and I want you both to answer it individually. What does Bitcoin mean to you?
I know my answer.
I know my answer.
Okay, go for it. You go first this time. Yeah.
To me, it means freedom for privacy. That my transactions are my own business, and also to take some power back with the purchasing power that I earn with my life force.
Mm-hmm.
You know, money is earned with labor. Labor is your time, and your time is your life. So getting that back is what Bitcoin means to me.
That was eloquent.
I think Saylor nailed it with hope, because that freedom that Tali just mentioned, we're a bit older than you guys, and looking at the kids, or one of our kids just got married, and we think about what them starting their own family, and if the things that we've learned about how things work in the fiat world, I'm already upset about. But if I didn't have Bitcoin, where we have a chance to take away the money that is helping support all that fundamentally, I would just be outright depressed, because I would see no way of that the system is so, the bureaucracy, the swamp, the whatever, like the technologies now that they have at their disposal, it's metastasized. It's so bad that no single person really would be able to do it. And so for something like Bitcoin to be here, and it's a rallying cry for ideas of libertarians and objectivists and fill in the blank, all these freedom loving type of concepts, we're now all united. We're all coming together with these principles. And at the core of that is Bitcoin. And that's because money can impact so many other things that, to me, it's a freedom. It's freedom, but it's the hope for the future, that without that, I don't know, I just would be depressed about what world we would be leaving the next generation.
So Tali, I love your answer, but I'm gonna have to go with Scott on this one. I feel like it is hope, and I've said it before on the podcast, but it's hope that, I get to raise my son in a world where his time, his energy, his life force, like you said, Tali, is his and his alone, and he gets to decide what he does with it. And he now has the outlet, he now has the pathway to do that. So I think both those answers are beautiful, and I appreciate you guys doing that. I know that I throw it at you. I don't give the guests time to think about that, because I want the top of mind question answer kind of situation. But the last thing we're gonna do, and then we'll close up the show. So I kind of mentioned before off air, but we're going to give you 2 tickets, one for Tali, one for Scott, to our conference in September. We mentioned it in the middle of the show, but our conference is in Brainerd, Minnesota, September 27th through the 29th. We hope that you guys can come and join us. It's going to be a great event. We're really looking forward to it. And each of you are going to have 1 free ticket to come and join us.
That sounds,
thank you so
Minnesota
much.
Sounds fantastic. And maybe we can even work together and see. Huddle Up is a mining game.
Yeah.
Maybe we could work together and see if we can figure out something that would be to add a little bit of flavor to your.
Sounds awesome.
That would be fun.
And we'd also love it. I don't know if you guys are set up for this, but we'd certainly want to send people your way, to explore these games and products. And, Christmas is on the way. It's a good time to get ahead of Christmas shopping with these kinds of things. And so, if you have a referral link or anything like that, we'd love to put it in the show notes and kind of share it around. And certainly would love to meet you guys in person at our conference in Minnesota this fall. So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make one for you. Then we can we
Yeah,
can have to
sounds
do that
good.
afterwards. But yeah, let's
Yeah.
let's do that.
Yeah, we'll make sure, like Will says, I'll make sure it gets in the show notes. And anybody who's listening, go to the show notes for a discount code off of any of the games. And please look into it. It's a great way to orange pill your friends and family. So, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I really enjoyed it. Scott and Tali, you guys were amazing guests. We got to have you on again sometime. I feel like we could talk to you for like a whole nother hour and a half. Just keep going about it. But with that is the Build a Mind podcast. Find us on all of your podcast sharing platforms. If you hit us up on Fountain and send us a boost, I'll definitely shout you out. The last boost that we got on the last episode 20, sorry, not episode 21. I think it was episode 16. We got a boost from Bryden, the guest, and he boosted us 50,000 sats and said, great job, guys. So with that, this was the Build a Mind podcast. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and keep orange pilling your friends and neighbors.
Thanks, guys. Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please note, the Build a Mind podcast provides information for general educational purposes only. This information should not be construed as legal, financial, or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information presented, and we encourage you to consult with a professional advisor, legal advisor, and/or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. The Build a Mind podcast and its affiliates are not responsible for any losses incurred as a result of using the information provided.